Hello everybody, this is Shane with Starner's Woodworking, and today I'm going to show you how I made this walnut live edge charcuterie board. Let's get right into it. So for this project here, I'm going to be using a live edge piece of walnut that I had milled up a couple years, so it is perfectly dry now and ready to use. The first step I'm going to be doing is debarking everything, getting all the bark off, and cutting out a square edge on each side. Once I had the ends of this thing cut off, I realized that it was really wobbly and warped. Luckily, it is not too thick, too wide for my planer. So I have a spare piece of MDF I'm going to use as a joiner jig. I'm going to get some shims on there, shim it up, and get as flat as I can, then send it through the planer that way. So here I'm just using hot glue to glue down these shims here, and this is actually my first time ever trying this technique with this joiner jig and the shims, because I've never really had a board warp this bad where it would make a huge difference. Anyways, I'm always down for trying new techniques and new ways to improve my skills as a woodworker. Surprisingly enough to me, this method actually worked perfectly just as I was planning. Basically, I just had to run it through the planer a couple times to get a good flat surface reference. And then after that, I just take the chisels and scrape off the hot glue and then flip it over and continue to run it through the planer here until I get it exactly flat and to the thickness that I like. After the board is finally nice and flat and planed down, I'm going to head over back to the workbench with my pencil and just kind of draw out a design, kind of somewhat follow the grain, but I'm looking for a natural look, not really symmetrical or anything perfect here, just kind of an eyeball so I can follow with the bandsaw after that. Then over to my mini bandsaw here. What I'm doing here first is just cutting a slight round over on the end of the board. Then after that, I'm going to be doing my best to try to follow the lines, make a bunch of relief cuts here, and this part is kind of time consuming because there's a lot of sharp curves and my bandsaw can't make those curves in one cut. So I'm going to have to be going back a lot here and doing the best I can to get as close as to the line possible. So after I have that cut out to where I like it, I'm going to be cutting out the inside of the handle. And I use these squeeze clamps here to clamp the board down to my table, my workbench, and it does a perfect job. But here I will have to be using a jigsaw, so I'm routing out some holes to where I can put the jigsaw in there and cut along the lines to my liking. Once I have all the edges cut out on the bandsaw and the jigsaw, I'm going to get out my belt sander here, throw in a fresh piece of 80 grit sandpaper, and get this thing sanded smooth and put a little round over to take off the edge on the corners here. Hope you guys are enjoying this video so far. I'm not going to try to bore you too much with sanding because it is not the most exciting thing to do in woodworking, but as everyone knows, it has to be done, and if you don't do it, your project will not turn out how you like it. But anyways, if you have learned something so far, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you guys so much. Now I'm just taking my belt sander here and putting a slight round over on all the machined edges. This is to just try to give it a more natural look and take the bite off the corners a little bit. So after this, I'm going to be doing some palm sanding. I believe I started with 60 grit. I went up all the way through the grits to 220. And now this is where I had to figure out a way to sand the inside of the handle. And this definitely wasn't the best way, but I have limited tools. So I taped a piece of old sandpaper to a drill bit in my drill and just went to town here. And this definitely, like I said, wasn't the best way, but it worked for me. After that, I went back with another old piece of sandpaper and took that edge off there. Here I'm just doing some wet sanding, and you can see the beautiful grain reveal here, which is definitely a very exciting part in the process. But the reason for the wet sanding is because it takes the fuzz off after the first time you wash it. Now, after hours and hours and hours of sanding, finally I am to the final process, and this is adding the finish, obviously the best part. So for the finish here, I'm just using a food-safe mineral oil, and then after I let that sink in and dry for an hour or two, I'll be coming back with a beeswax. Once this first layer of oil that I applied on the top is dry, I'm just gonna flip it over and I'm gonna apply another layer to the bottom. Let that dry for a good total of an hour or two just to make sure it really soaks in. Come back and wipe it off with a towel. Then I'm gonna apply some beeswax mixture, and what this does, it just creates a small protective layer against the water, anything that'll be on it. It's food safe, and also it really makes it smooth like it should be after you're done sanding it. Alright everybody, that is the end of the video for today. I hope you guys all enjoyed this simple, easy build that really anyone can do with just a few tools at home. This build was a lot of fun to do. I've actually made two other of these ones before, but they were too wide for my planer, so I had to flatten them on my router sled. And one thing I noticed is sending it through the planer definitely saves a lot of time and is a lot easier. But hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, if you think you learned something from this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.